oh, the 5-year-old FNAF babies are gonna hate me for this one. Nah, I'm just playing. This film was trash though, and I make no apologies for saying that. I don't take any pleasure in it because I desperately want video game films to be good, but it's just such a hard thing to adapt. I feel that maybe partly because when you watch a film or read a book or listen to a tale, you are an inactive observer of another world, so the stories are designed to accommodate that. But with video games, you are the active participant, so when they are translated to a format which requires you to engage with it in an inactive way, it loses its appeal, as that's not its original intention. Why this adaptation would fail in that definition is because the story is too heavily lifted from the games without enough time to fully convert everything that's needed. So instead of a streamlined cinematic experience, you get a car crash of a film that's pulling in several different directions, unsure of what it wants to be. The cameos are also just a distraction and make this feel less like a movie and more like a bad YouTube sketch. And I say that as somebody who was a big fan of game theory. Rest in peace, King. It was super jarring, if also admittedly quite nice, to see MatPat in the film, spouting his catchphrase like a pre-show wrestler. It dragged me out of the movie and I was barely into it anyway. The animatronics though are so cool, and the team behind them deserve a lot more praise and recognition than they seem to be getting. Like genuinely, the Oscars should have found a way to nominate them for something because that was absolutely stellar. I guarantee that if this wasn't both/one of a video game movie and or a horror film, they absolutely would be getting the praise that they deserve. Given that pretty much everything about this film is fine, my main complaints boil down to two things. I've already alluded to the fact that I think the story is unfocused and prime garbage, and I won't get into that because I simply don't want to dedicate the time to that in this video. But also the film is so horrid to look at. I don't mean that the cinematography is bad or that it's badly staged or the people on the camera are gross or ugly or anything. I just mean that the film is ugly, in a way that I do not feel was entirely intentional. Obviously with a horror film it's going to look more gritty, grungy and dirty, but this is off-putting to look at. All in all, the fact that this isn't the worst Blumhouse film of the year is concerning, but it doesn't mean it's any good.
Sexy black. Yeah. Them other boys don't know how to act. Yeah.
Honestly, the fact that this is higher than the most successful Blumhouse film ever made is hilarious to me. This is a film that is not good by any means whatsoever, but is a more focused story than Five Nights at Freddy's and is also filled to the brim with promise. The film is about a couple that go around having sex in various locations in Italia. They stumble upon some abandoned village and they get stalked and murdered. It's a pretty simple plot for a pretty short film. However, it is littered with technical issues, from the audio mixing being woeful at times to the camera being out of focus or overexposed regularly, and this is probably the worst made film of the year. The problems don't just stop there though, as there is a random influencer guy that keeps popping up throughout the film to spout random unfunny sex stuff, and he even repeats some lines in the same clip. It makes me ask whether the editors proof-watched their work, and it makes me wonder whether the editors proof-watched their work, and also it makes me wonder whether the editors proof-watched their work. Hang on. Despite all of this and the mid-acting from everyone but the influencer guy, the story actually works really well, and with more than a wing, a prayer, and a Derby County transfer budget, this could have been turned into a 5 out of 10 film.
Oh, hell no!
I've said it before and I will say it again. This was crap, but it was crap with style, and I can abide by that to an extent. One thing I will say is that it was nice to have a different perspective in a horror film. The importance of diversity of perspectives has been talked about to death on YouTube, but it's nice to know that more and more directors from different backgrounds can overcome systemic obstacles to make shit films. I was just so bored from start to finish, it was insane. Do you mind if we skip this one? I just can't be bothered. Watch it for yourselves and you'll see what I mean.
Who lives in a pineapple under the sea? Friendly crustacean.
It's not because she's black now. I've not turned into the quartering. It is because this is nothing more than a desperate cash grab from a declining studio. I'm actually very upset by how bad this film is, given that the Disney Renaissance films are some of my favourite films, and this film starred Halle Bailey. I was rooting for it. Then the first trailer dropped. I told myself no. This one is gonna be good. By the law of averages, they should get this one right. Then the second trailer dropped. At that point, even my delusion could not continue, and I went away sobbing, not watching this film until my delusion came back in December like a bad Saturday night kebab. I, quite understandably, was not pleasantly surprised, because instead of a fun twist upon a classic that still lovingly embraces the source material, we have a very ugly, soulless, and bloated, botched attempt at a video product. It was like the people at Disney were sat around planning how this film was going to do in the charts, because whilst I think that Halle Bailey has a phenomenal voice, her acting whilst singing left a little to be desired. They also brought on Lin-Manuel Miranda to defecate on the work of Howard Ashman and Alan Menken. I loved In the Heights and Hamilton, as well as thinking that Encanto's songs were one of the few exceptional parts of that movie. So it makes it even more astounding that the changes to the songs in this film are so awful you could power a city just from Ashman turning in his grave. Nowhere is that especially more apparent than with Poor Unfortunate Souls, because oh my god, what the fuck did they do to you? Part of me doesn't even want to get into how bad this new version is, because I could pick it apart line by line, and I don't have the time nor the restraint to do it. But I will say, listen to them both back to back and you will weep to see how the artistic effort of a group of relentlessly talented individuals from 1989 have had their work obliterated by their 2023 counterparts. The thing that most baffles me, not just about the song but the whole film, is that this failed when there is a ridiculous amount of talent in all areas. The director of Chicago, screenplay by the same man that did the screenplay for The Life of Pi, Javier Bardem, Melissa McCarthy, Daveed Diggs, Halle Bailey, an Oscar-winning cinematographer, and also Awkwafina is here. Yet this film is terrible, so that leaves me with one place to point the finger. Disney. While the Big D may have given the casting crew $250 million to work with, it is clear that something is clearly off. I don't know what it is because, like 9/11, I wasn't there, but given the track record of everyone involved and how poorly it came out, I feel like it's the only logical explanation.
Focus. Speed. I am speed.
This is not as bad as the internet would have you believe, but calling this good is similar to being a Wolverhampton Wanderers fan. It's weird, and no one else likes you, but no one can stop you, and it's not my business. After slagging off The Little Mermaid for it, I won't bore you by going over how ugly this film is, but what I will talk about is that this is not a full Flash movie, it's a Batman film for a silly amount of time. From when they meet him, right up until they fight Zod, this is essentially a team-up film with Batman as the star, although it is Michael Keaton, so you kind of have to give points for that. Honestly though, this film would have been watchable if we didn't have to deal with the most insufferable protagonist of any film I've seen this year, and yes, I am including Awkwafina's bird character and her cop character in that. Other Barry is so irritating to watch that I was actively rooting every time that Zod killed his world. I thought it was beautiful. I hated him so much, man. If you gave me Hitler, Stalin, Henry Kissinger and Barry in a room with a gun and 4 bullets, I would shoot Barry in the legs 4 times and offer freedom to whoever kept him alive the longest while setting the room on fire, and I would hope that his perception of time works the same as Red Rush from Invincible. So yeah, I think it's safe to say that he wasn't my favourite character in the film. Apart from the absolute abomination, nothing else really resonated with me in any meaningful way whatsoever. Considering this was supposed to be the last gasp saviour for the DCEU, with people hyping it up saying ludicrous stuff like, oh, it's the best comic book film of all time. You know, I can't be bothered anymore.
Do you know where my will to live is? That's right! It's gone.
Some Christmas films are vastly underrated, telling an emotional story that moves you like no other film can, telling heartwarming stories about the value of family. This is not one of those films. The main problem I have with the film is that it all could have been ended by saying, I wish I had $1 trillion. Then he'd be able to safely quit his job and work on his marriage, because at the end of the day, this guy is a good man just screwed by circumstance. It kind of makes it an uncomfortable watch. Melissa McCarthy is Melissa McCarthy. It's down to you whether that's a good thing or not, and no one else really has enough presence to be worth a mention. I'm sorry, but that's literally all I have to say about it. I can barely remember the movie, and I wrote this immediately after watching.
I love gold!
Despite what that one comment said in my hate comments video, this is a stupid movie that I don't like. There is suspension of disbelief, then actively being taken for a mug, then whatever the hell this movie does. I had to constantly remind myself that this wasn't supposed to be some invincible god. It was literally just a normal guy surviving encounters with Nazi tanks, falling from planes, and literally being hanged alive for hours. I might have been able to look past it if the action had been at least decent, but it's just so dull. I did appreciate the fact that the main guy didn't talk, and I thought his physical acting was excellent, but that's pretty much the best part of the film's plot. I don't find the retreating Nazis that much of a threat, especially when they can't even kill one guy, and the women in the back of the truck do nothing until the end. I'm sorry these reviews are a bit light, but films in the range of like 4 to 6 out of 10s, I really just don't have strong enough opinions on to care about them either way, especially the 5s.
Mad because small.
Well, he who remains no longer. There is no getting around the fact that despite his legal issues that have led to his deserved sacking, Jonathan Majors is by far the best part of the film, and the decision to kill off the most intimidating version of him through Ant-Man of all heroes was a baffling one. Imagine if the Black Widow film had been about her killing a more violent version of Thanos. It's dumb. Aside from that, the film looks horrendous. Genuinely, how can Marvel are spending like $250 million per film, and they still look like a graphic design student's passion project? Even with the want to put out over 400 hours of content a month. Are Marvel not embarrassed to release films with CGI in this state? Not to worry though, the story is bad enough that no one will notice the awful CGI. I don't know how Cassie and Hank would be able to do all the work without Michelle Pfeiffer noticing. She would have known and stopped it, thus ending the film. That's just an amuse-bouche though, as the entire story just has things happen because they need to happen. It's so dull and predictable. I wasn't expecting to remotely like the story, and I didn't. However, I must give credit where credit is due. The posters for this film were absolutely stellar for the most part. I may dislike every single Ant-Man film, but it may have the greatest lineup of posters I've ever seen for a movie franchise. They always get so creative with them, and they always look like something I'd want on my bedroom wall. In fact, if they weren't attached to such a garbage product, I'd have ordered one right now. But I can't have people thinking I like Ant-Man, so I'll keep waiting for an Ant-Man film I like, and keep hoping that the posters stay S tier. You are not a Nazi for seeing this film. You are not a MAGA edgelord. You're a victim of shit filmmaking. One of the most uniquely boring experiences I had in the cinema in 2023. This film thinks it's a lot better than it actually is, and you can tell that whenever they do a line like, "That's the sound of freedom." Also, I don't know how accurate a portrayal of real life events this film is, but the movie comes to a nice conclusion where everything makes sense and I still had time to do something else with my day. And then he doesn't find the girl he's looking for, so he has to do Jimmy Bale Rescue in the Jungle to retrieve the girl. It's like a whole different short film just tacked on. Like I said, I don't know how accurate the film is, and one of my biggest issues with based on a true story films is when they decide to radically change the history they're portraying. But I feel like it would have worked here just to tighten it up. They did enough to establish people trafficking as a major international issue without the Jimmy Bale bit tacked on at the end. Outside of that, the film looks like a film, and the performances range from fine to bad. But I really dislike how this movie was marketed, and also the ticketing campaign at the end of the film. I hate how they try and pressure you into making people see this crap, and the way the marketing talked about the film made it seem like if you didn't love this movie and buy 10 tickets for other people, then you're pro-human trafficking. It's just bizarre. Although it's not as mad as people saying that this was going to turn you into a MAGA freak though. I got no inclination of any type of political leaning throughout this film, but looking online you'd expect that this film was a gateway into shooting up a black church. The film just sucks. It doesn't also have to be propaganda from 1940s Germany.
Here comes the money. Money, money, money. Dollar, dollar.
A film that dares to ask, what if we made The Social Network, but it was about a Redditor? And bad. It's probably a bit unfair to the film, but the entire time I was watching it, all I was thinking was, I could be watching The Social Network right now. The Social Network is great, by the way. I know Zuckerberg himself isn't a big fan of it, but it's obviously so worth a watch. Dumb Money, however, is not. Paul Dano is great in it because he's Paul fucking Dano. Shailene Woodley's also great, and Pete Davidson is in the film too. I could sit here and tell you why I dislike the film, but I'm too excited about the next film on this list to keep talking about this one.
Come back here, you big monkey!
Unironically, this was my most anticipated film of the year, and I have to say, I was slightly disappointed. I own both this film and its predecessor on DVD, and I must say I was disappointed at the lack of DVD extras and bonus content, but I suppose I can't have expected too much because I still had a blast, even if I was expecting more. The first one was such a great experience, 10 out of 10 better than Schindler's List. I've never taken recreational drugs before, but I imagine this is what it's like to take Mary Jane and watch Godzilla vs. Kong. Yet for some reason the sequel decides it wants as little as possible to do with the original. Abraham's design is completely different. Gone is the goofy ass stone monkey from the first film. Instead we get this absolute fucking unit who looks better, but he's not my guy. My boy. My big boy. Big Abe. The Lord and Saviour himself, Eric Roberts, father of Emma and brother of Julia, is absolutely nowhere to be found, which is fair enough to be honest considering he's done about 1,000 films a year. Also, and most importantly, the main human character who was shown to have a special relationship with King Abraham just flat out isn't in the movie at all either. In the words of Drogba,
from Norway is the strongest official you can put down. This is supposed to be...
This all, and I mean all, could have been forgiven however, if the plot was just different. Better or worse, I don't care. Instead of two kaijus having a hoss fest, we instead get evil Russians trying to hack a mecha ape and Abe has to save them. Fuck that nonsense. Just have him fight the robot. I don't care about this Russian couple and their son. I came to see two incredibly poor CGI mega monsters fight each other, goddammit. It's an asylum film, so I don't have to tell you about the quality of anything else, but I can't truly express how disappointed I am. However, I did watch this with my friends, and they did have a laugh, and it was fun. And at the end of the day, isn't that what entertainment's all about? The first film I saw this year, and the first mid film of the year. This is an interesting documentary that takes a look at a really interesting and important topic, but it does it in a way that can feel overly long, repetitive, and a bit dull. I don't really watch a lot of documentaries of this type, but I did watch Hot Girls Wanted from 2015, so that's sort of my reference point. I found that one a lot more interesting and covering similar ground, so this documentary went down in my estimations because of that, and perhaps that's slightly unfair, but that is how I genuinely feel about it. A film that dares to ask, what if we made The Exorcist, but for the Pope? And bad. A stunning example of how to slightly annoy everyone you can. The film has been publicly disavowed by real-life Vatican exorcists. Russell Crowe and Franco Nero both also managed to snag Razzie nominations for their acting. However, I think that's bollocks, as whilst neither actor gave a great performance in this film, I could name 10 worse in each category this year. Side note, the Razzies can actually just be as bad as the films that they lampoon. It's always easy targets that people have slated to death. There's never a surprise or actual discussion/analysis. It's all just, bad film, bad, ha ha ha! The joke was funny, but they've made the same joke about 40 times now. It eventually gets stale. Plus half the winners and nominees don't belong within 1,000 places of an award? Is that the right word? Anyway, my favourite part of the movie was definitely when the demon child just flung the wrong priest out of the bedroom and demanded Inspector Javert. I also loved it when Russell Crowe gets possessed and just starts trying to game end himself. It looks so funny, especially when he keeps failing. Mr. Crowe is by far the best part about the film. It's BS he got a Razzie and he was let down. The effects, say it with me now, are not good. But I did enjoy the ending, despite the fact it looked terrible. The demon finally starts to feel like a threat and we get a bit of an arc with the father overcoming naked temptation. These next few films are 5 out of 10s and I really can't be bothered to talk in depth about them, so I'll be saying about a sentence each for them and stop when we get to the 6s.
Click, clack, nigga got gun.
My shorts review still stands. The bank scene in this is the only scene above a 4 out of 10 and it makes the film slightly bearable. The same people that brought you Sharknado, Locked Up, Ape vs Monster and Jailbait made a film better than Blumhouse's new flagship, their most profitable film ever, the DCEU's Last Gasp, a Disney live-action remake, and an MCU film starring their new Thanos-level threat. I did not get this film, but I didn't get it with style. Mid!
Boom, headshot!
Mid!
Super fast, and the only thing I can do is to drink my own pee.
Genuinely behind Ape vs Mecha Ape for my most anticipated film of the year, this one was again a massive disappointment.
Why do you feel the need to do that?
Mid! That's not the end of the 5 out of 10s, but I want to talk about the last two, and this next one is possibly top 3 most controversial placements on this list.